What if one of the greatest performances in cinematic history came at a devastating cost? Heath Ledger's portrayal of the Joker in The Dark Knight didn't just redefine the character, it set a new standard for acting itself. But as the world celebrated his artistry, few saw the personal struggles happening behind the scenes. Ledger battled insomnia throughout filming, often sleeping just a couple hours a night, and turned to prescription medication to cope with the demands of the role. From locked hotel rooms to haunting diaries, this story blurs the line between artistic genius and personal torment. Let's uncover why some believe his dedication to chaos may have been a double-edged sword, and what it truly took for Ledger to become the Joker. The transformation, becoming the Joker. Heath Ledger's process for becoming the Joker was unlike anything he or Hollywood had attempted before. To capture the chaos and unpredictability that defined the character, Ledger separated himself from daily life. He checked into a London hotel for about a month, closing himself off from friends and family. This wasn't just about memorizing lines or putting on makeup. Ledger wanted to understand the Joker's warped mindset from the inside out. In an interview with Empire magazine, he described the character as a psychopath, mass-murdering, schizophrenic clown, and set out to build every detail from scratch. A big part of this transformation was the infamous Joker diary. Ledger filled its pages with everything he thought would haunt the character's mind. There were photos of hyenas, clippings from A Clockwork Orange, and lines of dialogue like, "Why so serious?" scrawled in restless handwriting. His father later shared how the diary became a window into Heath's process, featuring unsettling images and references that matched the Joker's chaotic world. The final page, marked with a large "bye-bye," was especially hard for his family to see. This wasn't just a prop or a tool. It was Ledger's way of living inside the Joker's twisted point of view. Ledger's attention to detail shaped every part of the performance. He spent long hours in isolation, experimenting with different voices and laughs until he landed on something that felt truly unsettling. He watched footage of ventriloquist dummies because they frightened him, to help build the Joker's eerie presence. Director Christopher Nolan encouraged Ledger to push boundaries, and together they developed ideas like the Joker's home videos, which added another layer of realism to the character's terror. Ledger's physicality was just as important. He worked on the Joker's off-kilter walk, the way he tilted his head, and the infamous Kubrick stare that made his gaze so chilling. Even during creative sessions on set, Ledger would stay in character, ensuring that the Joker's energy carried through every take, but he wasn't socially withdrawn from the cast and crew. The intensity of Ledger's approach didn't go unnoticed. Christian Bale, who played Batman, recalled being told not to hold back in their fight scenes because Ledger wanted the violence to feel real. Friends and colleagues described Ledger as always committed, but this time the role demanded something more. The Joker wasn't just a villain, he was chaos personified, and Ledger dove in with everything he had. He called the experience the most fun I've ever had playing a character, but also admitted it was terrifying at times. All this preparation paid off in a performance that was magnetic, funny, and deeply disturbing. Critics and audiences alike were stunned by the depth Ledger brought to the role. But behind the scenes, the process took its toll. Ledger's transformation into the Joker wasn't just a creative challenge. It was a test of his emotional and physical limits. The cost of that commitment would soon become impossible to ignore, as the effects of the Joker's chaos began to seep into Ledger's own life. The cost of chaos, the psychological toll. The psychological toll of playing the Joker was not just a rumor. It was something Heath Ledger openly acknowledged. He described the experience as physically and mentally draining, a phrase that captures the weight of his commitment. Ledger was known for throwing himself into every character, but the Joker demanded a new level of intensity. He pushed himself, both on set and off, to maintain the energy and unpredictability that defined the role. The cost of that intensity soon became clear, especially in his struggle with insomnia. Ledger's battle with sleeplessness became a defining part of his life during and after filming The Dark Knight. In a 2007 interview with the New York Times, Ledger admitted, "Last week I probably slept an average of 2 hours a night. I couldn't stop thinking. My body was exhausted and my mind was still going." His ex-partner, Michelle Williams, echoed this, saying he had bouts with insomnia. He had too much energy. His mind was turning, always turning. These weren't just passing complaints. The constant mental activity and inability to rest left Ledger drained, even as he tried to keep up with the demands of his career and his personal life. To cope, Ledger turned to prescription medication. The pressure to keep performing and the exhaustion that came with it meant he needed help to sleep. During the filming of his final project, The Imaginarium of Dr. Parnassus, co-star Christopher Plummer noticed Ledger was struggling with walking pneumonia and said he was taking all these pills to help him. The combination of illness, lack of rest, and medication painted a picture of someone trying to hold everything together while his body and mind were pushed to their limits. The medications weren't just a quick fix. They became a necessary part of Ledger's routine, a way to manage the mounting anxiety and exhaustion. Psychologists who study performers under extreme stress, like Dr. John Fry, have pointed out that method acting, where actors immerse themselves completely in a role, can blur the line between character and self. For someone playing a figure as dark and chaotic as the Joker, that risk only grows. Fry explains that this kind of deep immersion can lead to emotional dissonance, a state where it becomes difficult to separate personal identity from the character's mindset. Ledger's decision to isolate himself, fill journals with disturbing images, and stay in character for long stretches may have made it even harder to step back when the camera stopped rolling. Ledger's approach to acting was always intense, but the Joker amplified the stakes. Friends and family saw the toll it took. His father later reflected on how Heath threw himself into every role, sometimes at great personal risk. The exhaustion, the nightmares, and the reliance on medication all pointed to a man wrestling with the fallout of his own dedication. The Joker was never just another part. It was a role that demanded everything, and Ledger gave it, even as the boundaries between his art and his well-being grew thin. This raises a question that still lingers. How much did the Joker's chaos truly shape Ledger's fate? And how much was already written in the pressures and patterns of his life? The answer is complicated, and it's what makes his story resonate long after the credits rolled. The Dark Legacy, the role versus the tragedy. The legacy of Heath Ledger's final role is tangled in a debate that has never really gone away. Did the Joker's chaos truly spill into Ledger's life? Or was his death the result of a more complicated set of circumstances? On January 22, 2008, Ledger was found unresponsive in his Manhattan apartment, and the shock was immediate. The official autopsy later confirmed his cause of death as acute intoxication due to a combination of prescription medications: hydrocodone, oxycodone, temazepam, diazepam, doxylamine, and alprazolam. For many, these details pointed to the dangers of mixing powerful drugs, especially when dealing with chronic insomnia and the relentless pressures of the film industry. But the story doesn't end there. Ledger's commitment to the Joker had been intense from the start. Production on The Dark Knight wrapped in late 2007, but Ledger remained invested long after the filming ended. He worked closely with the creative team in post-production, fine-tuning his performance and making sure his version of the Joker felt as authentic as possible. This level of dedication was nothing new for Ledger. According to his father, Kim Ledger, speaking in a documentary that featured family interviews, Heath had always gone deep into his characters. But this time, the immersion seemed different. Ledger isolated himself in a London hotel for weeks, kept a diary filled with disturbing imagery, and allowed the Joker's mindset to take up more space in his life than any role before. Friends and family noticed the toll. Ledger himself admitted in a 2007 New York Times interview that the Joker was physically and mentally draining. By then, his insomnia had worsened. Michelle Williams, his former partner, later shared that Ledger's restlessness and sleeplessness had been with him for years. Prescription medications became his way of coping, but the relief they offered was always temporary. The combination of exhaustion, anxiety, and the physical demands of his work created a cycle that was hard to break. By the time Ledger started working on The Imaginarium of Dr. Parnassus, his struggle with health was more visible. Co-star Christopher Plummer recalled Ledger being ill on set and relying on medication to get through each day. Observers began to ask if the Joker's influence was to blame, or if Ledger's challenges ran deeper. Psychologists who study performers under stress caution against drawing a straight line from the role to Ledger's death. Experts like Dr. John Fry remind us that while method acting and deep immersion can blur emotional boundaries, it's rarely just one factor that leads to tragedy. Ledger's experience with insomnia, his history of intense preparation, and the pressures of fame all played a part. It's also true that Ledger's approach wasn't unique to the Joker. He had always sacrificed for his roles, often locking himself away and losing himself in the work. Still, the Joker required a willingness to inhabit chaos, a mindset not easily shaken off. The official reports pointed to accidental overdose, not a single cause or moment. But the conversation about how much a role can affect an actor's well-being remains relevant, especially when the line between character and self becomes so thin. Ledger's story leaves us with questions that go beyond his final days. What is the true cost of artistic dedication? How much responsibility does the industry bear when it comes to protecting its brightest talents? The shadow of the Joker lingers, not just as a symbol of Ledger's talent, but as a reminder that even the most brilliant performances can come at a price. Conclusion. Ledger's journey as a Joker pushed the boundaries of acting and left a mark on Hollywood that won't fade. His performance earned him a posthumous Oscar, making his legacy impossible to ignore. But his story also forced the industry to look at the hidden cost of such dedication and the urgent need for better support system for actors. Now, the conversation is in your hands. What should studios and filmmakers do to protect performers who take on roles that demand so much? Let us know in the comments how you think the industry can do better. How do we honor his brilliant sacrifice while safeguarding artists' well-being?